living it today, celebrating.
One day, cars will run on water. At Bank PHB, we're already thinking like that. Bank PHB. Good. Better. Bank PHB.
I believe these qualities you have outlined would have struck an accord with the West. After all, politics is all about people, their wishes, their hopes, and their aspirations.
That's the theory.
You address those problems, you're the best of politicians and you're the best leader.
Exactly.
Why would Jammeh be a problem?
It's a problem because, one, although both realities are articulated in the outside world, they're not articulated in the same context at the same time. So when you talk about dictatorial leadership, which by definition you could not dispute from '94 up until the election, because a dictator by definition is one who takes over by force and controls and rules. So from '94 to the election, okay, you can't dispute that, that fits the definition. But from the first election, when the people elected him, then that label ceased to apply. And when you look at the development that has resulted, everything connected with that concept becomes null and void. When you look at the progress, the changes over 17 years, as we contrast what existed under the previous colonial successor government, it's something that should be modeled in the West. And often it's not articulated in the same context. You know, here, where we have those things that I contrasted that were the realities, look where we are 17 years later. We have nearly 600 educational institutions where there were no schools. We have wells and taps where there were no water. We have hospitals and healthcare centers where after 30 years such services were not even a dream. We have paved roads where only dirt, barely navigable roads existed. We have concrete fences surrounding houses and bulging human habitations where only insects and animals had prevailed prior. We have lights and electricity where only darkness prevailed. You know, we have micro-employment that has enabled hard-working pioneering parents to clothe and educate their children so that their children can build robustly on a foundation that we labor to install now, in place of the poverty-saturated desolation that existed before. You know, according to Bible prophecy, the time is going to come when the sovereign creator comes and by force puts down global rule and puts in place a global environment that's going to restore with honesty and integrity and respect, an environment that's going to be good for the whole world. You know, we have a visionary who has done and is laboring to do physically a micro model of that future global reality. And that's what is developing as a reality in the Gambia. How can people outside relate to that? The data for that does not exist in their world. So coming from this kind of post-colonial oppression to what we see now as thriving opportunity, they can't relate to that. They don't have the data to internalize that. So that's part of what we have to articulate in the same context so that what appears to them to be a dichotomy between the leadership and development find out it's not a dichotomy. One is a byproduct of the other. And one is the evidence of the real integrity of the other. That's the reality of the Gambia. We are a unique phenomenon, and we need to understand it as that, as Gambians. We need to portray it. We need to learn to articulate it as that. We need to represent that, because we can't be like the rest of the world. The rest of the world is different. We want some of the same things, but the way we achieve it is going to be the, quote, Gambian way, because it's a different environment, it's a different system. And let's look at the reality. In 17 years, there's no place where you can look in the world and see similar progress. So it speaks for itself.
Well, since the change of government in this country in 1994, I think the leadership had really made its position clear from the outset in terms of its relationship with the outside, particularly the West, that we are a sovereign, independent country, small All may be, of course, but we are a great country with great hearts, with great people. That we're going to develop this country, that we are not going to rely on your handouts, that we will push this country. And then, all of a sudden, even in the transition period, the 2-year transition period, 94 to 96, in terms of development activities, what had happened convinced Gambian people that indeed these people are really here for the good of this country. But again, the West saw us. They didn't give us money, but they saw this country developing. They begin to wonder where the money was coming. And in an interview, I think, with one of the Western media outlets, he told them that God is his World Bank, that he was not going to rely on their development aid. Even his most vociferous critics believe that the man has an unparalleled record in terms of development achievement over the years. And that's all too apparent and too conspicuous for all to see. What is the problem?
The problem is the ability to internalize the reality on the part of those on the outside that have no framework. You know, if you don't have a foundation in arithmetic, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, there's no way I can teach you algebra where you have to be substituting integers for numbers, letters for numbers. There's no way you can rationalize that. In the West, the realities here, the realities of development is something that they can see. But the mechanism that caused it to be reality is something that they cannot relate to. And that's why this is something that, and as we're doing in this forum, provides an opportunity to explain and connect the two. Because nobody can refute the development. It's there. Nobody can say it doesn't exist, that it's a lie. It's there. The photos of the before and now.
No.
That explains the reality that happened.
This is the 21st century.
But then the question becomes, how did it happen? And you see, they don't want to acknowledge that this one that they want to slander as a dictator, as a negative man, they don't want to acknowledge that he and his system, his administration, his methodology has produced this positive fruit. And that is the reality. You know, 17 years ago, a young soldier with some of his colleagues believed that he could stop the deterioration